Hello, and welcome to the conversation from the BBC World Service. This is the programme that celebrates the richness and diversity of women's lives and experiences around the world. I'm Dashiani Navanayagam. I'm also a massive fan of rice. I eat it almost every day, and I'm not the only one. 3.5 billion of us worldwide consume it, and it's women who are largely responsible for growing it. But rice is also a food staple that faces increasing challenges to produce due to climate change. So my guests today are Ranjita Puskar, a social economist in India for the International Rice Research Institute. She works on innovations to improve the outcomes for women in agriculture. And Dr. Pauline Shivange, an agronomist in Tanzania whose research focuses on the management of natural resources for improved crop productivity in Africa and Southeast Asia. Ranjita and Pauline, a very warm welcome to the conversation. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Darcy. Thank you.
Now, some of us might not know just how varied this crop is. So, Pauline, you're an agronomist. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of rice and also how many varieties of it there are?
I may not be able to tell you the number of varieties there are. There are so many. Just to give a background, rice is native to both Asia and Africa. So in Asia, the native is Oryza sativa, and in Africa, it's Oryza glaberrima. So the domestication of both Oryza sativa and Oryza glaberrima started around the same time. It started a little earlier in Asia, but also in Africa. The rice that is from Asia requires large amounts of water and nutrients, whereas the rice in Africa, Oryza glaberima, grows in drier conditions with less water, and it's more resilient to climate stress such as droughts, and it's also suitable for the resource-poor farmers, typical of the farmers that we have in Africa. Oryza in Asia is a little taller. The one from Africa is a little shorter. So although the rice from Africa is low yielding compared to the rice from Asia, it has such high diversity, and because it's resilient to many stresses, including pests and diseases and droughts, it is an important source for genetic diversity for our breeding programs that we have in Erie.
Now, I said 3.5 billion of us eat rice around the world. Ranjita, you're smiling very widely. How common is it, though, for people to eat it around the world?
I think the story of rice is really the story of Asia. So about 90% of the world's rice is actually produced in Asia and also consumed here. So about, 2.7 billion people in Asia actually consume it as their main staple. I think on an average, every person in Asia eats about 100 to 150 kilos per annum, while in the rest of the world, the average is actually even less than 15 kilos per year. So this is almost 35 to 60% of daily calories of people in Asia. Basically, it is life, it is culture, it is livelihood, it is food.
I can tell that you obviously eat a lot of rice. I eat a lot of rice. I come from a Southeast Asian household. But Pauline, you're from Zimbabwe and you didn't grow up eating a lot of it. Has that changed for you now?
Yes, it has changed for me and for many of us in Africa. Although Ranjita indicated that most of the rice is consumed in Asia, if you look at recent trends, more and more rice is being consumed in Africa. The demand for rice is increasing at a faster pace in Africa than in all the other parts of the world.
Why do you think that is?
It's a number of interconnected issues. The population is rising, so the demand is also increasing because we have a larger population to feed. We have a change in the family structure where we have women more and more involved in formal work. So the preparation of the traditional coarse grains is becoming less and less. It's more convenient to prepare rice. And also with urbanization, families are moving more towards rice. I'll tell you that as a young girl, We used to eat rice maybe once or twice a year, but now it has become a daily part of our diets.
So it was very much a special occasion type of meal for you.
Yes, it was a meal for the festivities of the Christmas time.
And Ranjita, you said that, rice can make up a large proportion of people's calories, particularly in Asia. But as a food, how important is it nutritionally?
It is extremely important for calories, and that is pretty important in terms of energy, and that becomes the basis for food security for a lot of I mean, we are talking about millions of people here. It does also have a certain amount of protein, zinc, and vitamin A, etc.
And given how ubiquitous rice is, it is striking that it's mainly women who are responsible for growing it. Ranjita, tell us exactly what the proportion is. How many women grow rice around the world?
Women work in rice systems, and it is almost about 60 to 70% of the labor contribution in rice systems comes from women. 60 to 70% in Asia. I think on an average, it is almost about 45 to 50% across the globe. So basically, I say the day women stop engaging in rice production, sorry, all of us are going to have a huge threat of food security.
You've both worked on different continents. Pauline, has that been your experience in Africa too? Are women mainly responsible for the production of rice there?
You find that both men and women are involved in rice production. It's just that what I've seen in Africa is that women are burdened with the labor consuming or time consuming activities such as transplanting, weeding. They are both back breaking activities that are relegated to women.
So, given that we know that rice is a globally important food source and that women are doing the majority of rice growing, that they're doing a lot of the very intensive labour around it, how financially lucrative is this for them, Ranjita?
Let me take the case of India. It still continues to be one of the most profitable crops that a farmer can cultivate. I mean, it is a combination of good varieties, yields, but also government policies, etc., that make it more lucrative to cultivate and market rice. But how much do women benefit? That's another question, because it all very much depends on who has the decision making power in these households. They contribute a lot of labor, they do all the hard work, but then oftentimes the decision to sell, how much to sell, where to sell, what to do with the money that's earned as a result of that rests with men. Also, mainly because the women don't really own a lot of land across the world. It's a problem. I mean, on an average, women only own about 11% of the land holdings, and India it is about 13%. So basically, a lot of the transactions that happen with the government or in the markets are by men, and therefore they get to control the income that comes from there. So I think there is a challenge there that needs to be corrected.
Pauline, I saw you nodding away there.
Oh yeah, it's the same in Africa really. The women do not make the decisions, and you find that in female-headed households they suffer because the women do not own the land, they don't have rights to land, and they don't have access to finance, which limits their capacity to produce as much as the male-headed households. And I believe it's the same in Asia.
That's correct. Actually, the productivity or the yield that comes out per unit of land is almost 24% lower on women managed farms as compared to plots managed by men. And that's mainly because of women's limited access to inputs and resources, etc. So, fertilizers they might need, or the pesticides, or actually, most importantly, the advice that they need, the technical advice, the skill development that needs to happen. All that because they're not considered farmers despite all the work that they do. I mean, we'd practically have no food production if women weren't engaged in agriculture. It's not just rice, it's all the crops. Yet they are invisible to the system, to the policies. Because on records, it's the man who's the head of the household, who's the farmer, and therefore they have access to it. Like, for example, I think the most important constraint is access to finance or credit. Because women don't own land, they can't go to a financial institution and ask for a loan because they don't have anything to mortgage. It's usually the land that is mortgaged, and therefore they're left out. Because they don't have that money, they can't afford to buy the seed and the fertilizer. And we have seen from our research that, women actually tend to buy lower quality seed or lower quality fertilizer, etc., knowing it is lower quality, but just because they don't have enough money, cash in their hand to buy at that point in time.
These aren't the only issues that face women in rice production. Pauline, how is climate change affecting the production of rice?
We have extremes of weather, increased occurrence of floods and droughts. We have increased occurrence or incidence of pests and diseases that affect rice production. So you'll find that much of the rice production is affected by climate change. We have a decline in rice productivity. In some areas, for example, I believe in Nigeria, in the last couple of years, they suffered losses in yields because of flooding. In other parts of East Africa, they also had droughts. So farmers are grappling with this phenomenon, and they have limited capacity to handle some of these challenges. For example, most of the rice that is produced in Africa is produced in rain-fed conditions, which means that it gives farmers less opportunity to cope with prolonged dry spells. The farmers may have some of these varieties that are drought tolerant, but if the drought is prolonged, it affects the productivity. So farmers are really facing climate change issues pretty badly.
Ranjita, what about you? What are you seeing?
When we are talking about climate change, we are talking about erratic rainfall. Rain doesn't come when it's supposed to come. It comes when it's not supposed to. There's increasing frequency and intensity of floods. There's submergence, and there's heat stress, something that we aren't talking enough about. I think Europe is looking at the impacts on human beings, etc. But there's a lot happening with crops as well. What research actually says is that if the temperature increases by 1 degree Celsius in India, the rice yield will vary by almost 20%. And if there is a 2.5 to 5 degree Celsius temperature rice yields are expected to go down by almost 30 to 40%. And that is very, very significant. It isn't just the yields that are going down, it's actually the nutrition quality of the grains is going down. Research shows us that if there is a 2 degrees centigrade increase in temperature, the protein content in rice grain can go down by almost 10%. Iron levels can drop by 5 to 10%, zinc by 9%. So that is significant. And if this does happen, the expectation is that there will be an additional 150 to 200 million people at risk of zinc deficiency by 2050.
You're listening to The Conversation from the BBC World Service. I'm Dashiani Navanayagam, and today I'm talking to economist Ranjita Puskar in India and agronomist Pauline Shivenge in Tanzania about the key role women play in growing rice. Pauline, what are the climate-smart solutions we can implement?
Erie has actually developed a number of climate resilient solutions spanning across agronomy and breeding. So we have a big gene bank in the Philippines, and we breed varieties that are tolerant to floods, submergency, to pests, to diseases, salinity, heat, like Ranjita has indicated. So we are trying to develop some of these varieties and evaluating them across different environments. In some instances, we have to develop rice varieties that have multiple stress tolerance because you have the co-occurrence of drought and flood, co-occurrence of drought and salinity. So we have to develop varieties that can tolerate the multiple stresses. On the agronomy side, we have developed technologies such as direct seeded rice, which uses less water, alternate wetting and drying, which uses less water as well. Both direct seeded rice and alternate wetting and drying, they have benefits in terms of climate mitigation. They reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, which is the other side of rice production. So rice is affected by climate change. It also affects climate change. We have technologies such as tailored fertilizer application, because both in Asia and in Africa, the farmers that grow rice, they are smallholders. But if you look at the fields, they vary even within short distances. So if we give blanket fertilizer recommendations to the farmers, in some cases we'll be over applying nutrients, in some cases we'll be under applying the nutrients. So we need to tailor the recommendations to suit the conditions of each field.
Ranjita, how are you seeing people adapting to some of these techniques and solutions?
These farmers, small farmers, and women have actually been adapting to the changes over time. And the most powerful thing is when research generated technologies and innovations blend with the indigenous knowledge, the knowledge that these farmers have. And I think a lot of these technologies are really helping. Pauline talked about these stress tolerant rice varieties, and we've seen a lot of that. The most marginal, most vulnerable farmers, the socioeconomically marginalized groups, have actually started using those varieties, improving their knowledge, awareness about all these new technologies, the climate smart agricultural technologies, training them, building their skills to use those, and they are actually embracing those. So there is hope. I feel very optimistic about it. It's not easy, but it's not impossible either.
It sounds like there are a lot of technologies being developed to help at the moment. But I guess, in your opinion, what's the most promising innovation you've seen for climate resilient rice?
One thing I do want to point out is as climate change is happening, a lot of the men are migrating out of rural areas, getting out of agriculture in search of better income and employment opportunities. And therefore, the responsibility of managing the farm has fallen on the women increasingly in most parts of the world. And they have to do that in addition to all the domestic care work that they have always done. And we have had some technologies like mechanical transplanters or the direct seeded rice that Pauline talked about, which can actually reduce some of the labor burdens. And I think for women those have been extremely powerful, I think. But I will say we still have long ways to go.
Pauline, what projects is the International Rice Research Institute, or IRI as it's otherwise called, running to ensure more equitable access for women to these more resilient growing practices and seeds?
In our projects, we try to ensure that we have participation of women. We do have capacity building, which is really important. Ranjita indicated that women have less access to technological information. So it's important that we do reach these farmers with capacity building. Here in Tanzania, one of the challenges we have is access to quality seed. The production of seed is left to the farmers or to other smaller groups. So in Erie, we are training female farmer groups as well as male farmer groups on seed production technologies to ensure that they know how to produce good quality seed, which is a precursor to getting the good rice production and also increasing the yield. We have other technologies. I talked about the tailored nutrient management. We are developing digital tools. For example, for the seed, here in Tanzania, we have a digital tool called Seedcast, which tells farmers where to access the seeds of the improved varieties and the quantities that are available in different localities.
Ranjita, tell us about your project in Odisha and how that supports women.
So we work with almost about 5,000 women now across three what are called farmer producer companies. These are not exactly cooperatives, but these are women's collectives which are business commercial oriented. So they are actually shareholders of that company, so they are supposed to be profit making entities, and so these are led by women, these are managed by women. The first business we started with is seed business. Pauline talked about, how seed does become a major constraint, especially these stress tolerant varieties or any varieties. Good quality seed is a major constraint. So there is a market out there. There is unmet demand. So we train them in technical skills, how to produce good quality seed, how do you get it certified by government agencies. We also train them in business skills. How do you develop a business model? How do you develop marketing linkages? How do you brand and advertise, promote your product, sell? How do you reinvest back to grow your business? So all that skill building was done, and we work with local NGO partners to do all that. And now these three companies, those women, those 5,000 women, they have thriving seed businesses sold under two brands, and then they are known and they're doing really well. So basically, it has given them a lot of confidence in themselves as not just farmers, but also as business women, somebody who can run a business enterprise. That has given them agency, that decision making within households. The communities recognize them as leaders. Actually, one of the FPCs in its second year itself won an award from the government, and I think they've won like 4 or 5 awards over the last few years. We are very, very proud of those women. I mean, all credit goes to them. All that we did was, give them a little support, but then I take a lot of inspiration from those women. I mean, every time I see them, I'm like, yeah.
I feel like I've learned so much about the production, but also all the fantastic innovations that are happening in this field. But I wondered, what's the one question that you wish people would ask you about rice that they never do? Pauline.
One thing that I would like to emphasize is that we don't take these innovations in isolation. We take them as bundled solutions, because if we just take the climate resilient varieties without combining with the management, then we miss the mark. We really need to bundle these innovations to ensure that we double the benefits that the farmers get. And then there's another issue, something that we've been trying to get funding for. Rice fields in Africa present an additional problem other than the climate change in terms of emissions. The rice fields serve as habitats for malaria vector mosquitoes. So you know that malaria affects Africa disproportionately compared to the rest of the world. 95% of the deaths caused by malaria are in Africa, and these are really associated with rice fields. So we can adopt innovations that can benefit both in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, but also reduce the habitats for the mosquitoes, for the breeding of the mosquitoes, to generate core benefits on the health side, on the climate side, on food security side. But the challenge we have is that malaria sits with the health ministries, rice production sits with the agricultural ministries. The two bodies don't always talk together. So it really affects the joint efforts to try and address the challenges that we face with this health and climate and food security nexus challenge. Yeah.
Ranjita, what is there one question that you wish people would always ask you about rice and they never do?
You asked me all those questions, and I wish more people asked me those. But I think I really would like more people to come and work with us so that we can design agricultural innovations, policies, markets where women are not just participating but are leaders shaping the food systems. Let's see how to do that. That's what I want to hear more of.
And finally, to end, I cannot not ask you this because we've been talking so much about rice and I do love it. But what is your favourite way to eat rice and how do you cook it? Ranjita, why don't you go first?
Okay. I come from a city called Hyderabad in India, and this is where the famous biryani comes from. The only thing I'm religious about in life is Hyderabadi biryani, and that's how I like to eat it.
Wow. There you go. And Pauline?
So we grew up with some red rice varieties, so we call them traditional. And the way we used to prepare this rice was to boil and then you add peanut butter. It becomes a wholesome meal. So I really enjoy eating peanut butter rice.
I've never heard of that before, but that's something that I'm definitely going to try. Ranjita and Pauline, thank you so much for such an enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My guests today on The Conversation from the BBC World Service have been Ranjita Puskar, a social economist leading gender and youth research, and agronomist Pauline Chivenge from the International Rice Research Institute.